Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the curse of King Tut's tomb. So the curse of the pharaohs has been bouncing around pop culture for quite a bit. There have been movies and books made about it, TV shows, documentaries, you name it. And arguably the most famous example of this is the curse of King Tut's tomb. So a little background on Tut. He was born in 1341 BCE and died in 1323 BCE. He was the 12th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, and he reigned for 9 years from 1332 BCE to 1323 BCE. He died at the age of 19, which for that time was not that young of a death. The average life expectancy was 32 years old, and it was rare for people to live past 40. So it was a completely different world back then. He was married to his half-sister, so there's a little bit of incest going on. And the only reason that he is so well known was not for anything that he ever did during his reign, but for his intact tomb. His tomb is, to date, the only completely intact tomb of a pharaoh ever found. All of the other tombs that have been found have been robbed and raided throughout the centuries. This was truly a one-of-a-kind find. The tomb was discovered by British archaeologist Howard Carter, who went to Egypt in 1891 to begin a career as an Egyptologist. However, it was not until 1922 when he found the tomb. He was funded by George Herbert, who was an English lord, the Lord of Carnarvon. He was commonly called Lord Carnarvon. He had been funding Carter and giving him money. He was about to the point where he was going to tell Carter that he just cannot afford it anymore. And it got to a point where he said, unless you find something big in the next month, I'm cutting you off. Then the discovery happened. On November 26, 1922, Howard Carter's team found the steps going down into the tomb buried underneath the sand. Once it was found, they spent over 17 years excavating it, documenting everything inside. The tomb consisted of 4 rooms: an antechamber, a burial chamber, an annex chamber, and the treasury chamber. And in the burial chamber, they found a gigantic sarcophagus, a gigantic complex of sarcophaguses within sarcophaguses within sarcophaguses. And when they found the solid gold sarcophagus, the very inner one which held the mummy, they opened it after 3,000 years and found Tut's mummy. It was glued to the bottom of it by a resin that was used in the mummification process, and they could not remove it for the life of them. So Howard Carter took a heated knife and cut the body out. Many people believe that this may have started the curse. On the door of the tomb was an inscription that read, "Death will come swiftly to those who disturb the tomb of the king." But this was not the first tomb ever to have been invented by the Egyptians. Many Egyptian tombs, not even tombs of pharaohs, had curses on them. And one of the most common curses was, "They that shall break the seal of this tomb will meet death by disease that no doctor can diagnose." There were many unexplained, bizarre deaths surrounding the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun. People try to rationalize it, but you cannot rationalize everything that happened. I believe there's something bigger going on behind it. Here are some of the more notable deaths. First up is Lord Carnarvon himself, the man who made it all happen with his money. A few months after the tomb was discovered, he cut himself while shaving, and he opened up a mosquito bite. He got blood poisoning, and he died from it. At the very moment of his death, all the lights in Cairo went out, and that same day, his dog in England jumped to its death from the balcony of his home. That cannot be a coincidence. The next famous death was that of Sir Bruce Ingram. He was a friend of Lord Carnarvon. Carnarvon had gifted him a paperweight made by a mummified hand, which was wearing a scarab bracelet. On the bracelet was the inscription, "Cursed be he who moved my body. To him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." Soon after receiving the gift, his house caught on fire. The entire home was gutted. He then rebuilt it, but then it was devastated by a massive flood, to which he threw away the gift, because of course he did. There were even people who were not even directly involved with the discovery or excavation of the tomb, but were merely visitors who died from the curse. The most high-profile example of anyone to die from the curse was Prince Ali Hamal Fahmy Bey, who was murdered shortly after visiting the tomb. Shirley Stack, who was the then leader of Sudan, was also murdered shortly following his visit to the tomb. British MP Aubrey Herbert went blind shortly after his visit to the tomb. Then, like Lord Carnarvon, died of blood poisoning. Aubrey Herbert was Lord Carnarvon's half-brother. It is said that upon entering the burial chamber, he remarked aloud, "Something dreadful is going to happen to our family." In 1924, Sir Archibald Douglas Ree, who was responsible for the initial x-rays of King Tut's mummy, died of mysterious illness, making the words of the earlier curse, that death by disease no doctor can diagnose, ring eerily true. Another Egyptologist, A.G. Evelyn White, had been in the first team of explorers to enter the tomb, and he went on and he hung himself and left a note that said he had succumbed to a curse. The curse struck again in 1926, when George Benedide of the Louvre Museum in Paris died after visiting the ongoing excavations. The next death was of Aaron Ember, another Egyptologist who died that same year when his house caught on fire. After Carter's discovery of the tomb, Egyptologist A.C. Mace took over from 1924 to 1928, engaging in further excavations and making further discoveries. The longer that he was there, the poorer that his health became, and one day he collapsed and was rushed to the hospital, and it was found that he had arsenic poisoning, and he died in the same hospital as Lord Carnarvon. A year later, Howard Carter's personal secretary, Richard Bethel, was found smothered to death in his bed. Months later, Bethel's father jumped to his death from his 7-story apartment. His suicide note read, "I really cannot stand any more horrors and hardly see what good I am doing here, so I am making my exit." His apartment was filled with artifacts directly from the dig site, gifted him by his son. And later that year, Lord Carnarvon's other half-brother died from malarial pneumonia. He was the last person to die until 1995. When American archaeologist Cheryl Munson visited the tomb and mysteriously died shortly after. Within the 6-year period following the discovery of the tomb, Lord Carnarvon, both his brothers, Carter's chief archaeologist, his personal secretary, his secretary's father, the excavation's radiologist, and 6 other prominent visitors to the tomb were dead. A lot of people try to rationalize this. I don't believe there is an explanation. I believe there are greater forces at work here, like I said. And especially because of Lord Carnarvon's death, what are the odds at the exact moment he dies, the lights go out, and on another continent, his dog jumps to his death? Now, there is a very bizarre theory surrounding the curse that I came across on the internet. A historian recently released a paper on famed Satanist Aleister Crowley. After studying his journals and notes, he believes that the death were at Crowley's hand and that he may have used black magic. Crowley had borrowed from ancient Egyptian spiritual practice in his own worship and was thought to maybe have been offended by the excavation of Egyptian tombs. And as a way to get revenge, either for himself, for the ancient Egyptians, or both, he used black magic to bring the curse to life. Now, even though all of this happened so long ago, there are some people who believe there are still paranormal things happening in King Tut's tomb right now. I went on to Reddit and I found a couple stories of tourists who had strange things happen to them. One person passed out and woke up and had forgotten everything that had happened for the past week and had forgotten that they had even come to Egypt at all. Another person left the tomb with scratches all over their back. And another person had a nightmare after visiting the tomb that someone in their family would die. They got up the next day and found out that their aunt had died. About 13 years ago, there was a British TV show called Paranormal Egypt, in which a psychic and the host would go to Egypt and investigate different places, different tombs and monuments that were supposedly haunted. And they did go into King Tut's tomb, and they believe that they made contact with him. So there's clearly still a presence there. There's still something that's going on there. Now, if you've ever read anything about King Tut on the internet, you'll know that a lot of people think that he or his father may have been aliens. His father was named Akhenaten. And if you just look at statues of this guy, he's weird looking. His head is misshapen. And if you saw someone walking around with a head like that, you'd think they were from outer space. He tried to replace the traditional Egyptian religion of worship of multiple gods with the worship of one god named Aten, the sun disk.
We know from the records that survive from ancient Egypt, from the walls of tombs and temples, that there was a pharaoh called Akhenaten who reigned for 17 years.
Akhenaten believed in a complete different ideology than all the ancient Egyptian cults and religion at the time. And there was the struggle between Akhenaten and the high priests. Akhenaten believed that there's only one God, not multiple. And that one God is God Aten. He is the power behind the solar disk.
So what is it about Akhenaten that makes the opening of his tomb so powerful? Because Akhenaten was potentially of extraterrestrial origin. This ultimately goes back to Akhenaten's introduction of the teaching of the celestial disk.
Perhaps that sun disk that Akhenaten prayed to could have been an extraterrestrial giving knowledge to the ancient Egyptians.
But there are people who believe that it wasn't really a sun disk, but a UFO that he was trying to get people to worship. And if he were an alien, that would make sense. About 5 years ago, a British archaeological team claimed to have discovered evidence of a hidden chamber in King Tut's tomb. It blew up on the internet, National Geographic, The Guardian, CNN, everyone was talking about it. And the Egyptian government even said that they were 90% certain that there was a hidden chamber in King Tut's tomb. They used penetrating radar to look behind it, and certain photos showed that there was different material in one part of the wall, and they could see the shape of a doorway. It might be under the plaster.
この表情とここの表情は違いますが変わる。
They change from there to there.
West side of the wall here, we have a solid rock. From the stick of the King Tutankhamun to the end of the wall, we find another read of the radar scan. It tells us that we have here something behind. It could be another chamber behind.
My reasoning is correct. What we're faced with is a continuation of the tomb, leading to a second burial chamber.
They had mounds of scientific evidence to back this up, and they were just waiting for the go-ahead from the Egyptian government to make a little hole in the plaster and peer beyond. But then the Egyptian government came out and said there was nothing there, and there never had been anything there, and there was faulty. I think it's a massive cover-up. There is no way that the radar and the scans and all of it failed. I believe that the Egyptians are hiding whatever is there in that tomb. And if you think about it, if King Tut had been an alien or his father had been an alien, there might be something of an extraterrestrial nature in that chamber that they do not want the world to know about. Because it's not just the US government that covers up aliens. Everywhere in the world is doing it. If King Tut and his father were aliens or part alien, maybe somehow the aliens caused this curse to happen to discourage people from further excavating the tomb so they wouldn't find it, wouldn't find whatever is in that chamber. The whole thing about the chamber in the tomb is very sketchy. I believe there's something there and it's being covered up. That is it for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video, share the channel, and help me grow. All right, see you guys next week.